including the Caller Times Volunteer Award and the Corpus Christi Volunteer Center Lifetime Achievement Award. Please put your hands together for Miss Laurie Lee.
You were given a little sheet of paper before you came in, and it's like it's actually a Jewish poem. If everyone would stand up for a minute and grab that little sheet of paper, I'd like you to recite this with me, please, if you don't mind. Not only that, you can stretch your legs. Y'all have your little pieces of paper? They should be on your table. If someone has one beside you, just read it with them, okay? Y'all ready? In the rising of the sun and at its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. At the opening of the buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. As long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. Thank you so much. I am not your usual keynote speaker at a conference such as this. I have no credentials. There are no letters after my name, no degrees I have obtained. I have only my life experience, my story, my love, and my light to offer you today. Denial of fear lends tremendous power. What an incredible challenge HIV/AIDS has become, not only for the people of Texas, but for humankind everywhere. Texas, as a state, a community, has risen to meet this challenge. We have faced the odds, however bleak, and we have set a precedent. Others have followed. There is something extraordinary and special about HIV/AIDS. I've always believed that HIV/AIDS could become the avenue from which unconditional love and acceptance throughout the world would be achieved. I've also seen many opportunities arising from AIDS. An opportunity to abolish prejudice and stigma, an opportunity to give of oneself despite the great losses involved, and an opportunity to educate hearts as well as minds. To separate and ostracize the diseased is to create discord in every man, woman, and child. Because throughout this epidemic, the LGBT community has stood up in ever-increasing numbers. Women and children have shown the world what courage means, and there are families of people with AIDS who inspire us all. These past several years, we had the opportunity to travel all over Texas. We spoke to many schools, churches, civic organizations, prisons, rehabs. If they let us in, we win. Many have heard the message of HIV/AIDS. We feared rejection. We found acceptance. We feared isolation. We found love and compassion. We exposed ourselves to the elements. We are not special. We are you. We are not different. We are you. Mothers, brothers, sisters, fathers, sons, these are the true faces of HIV/AIDS. Persons with AIDS, HIV, it is time to return to the sunlight, leaving shadows behind. We must experience life's moments and sometimes accept its decline. My faith, my hope, tells me it's love you'll find. And in honor of that, my name is Laurie Lee, daughter of Dawn and Rebecca, mother to Elizabeth and Seth, and grandmother now to Mackie C, D-Rex, Dicky Mom, Lady Bird, Domino, and my little Charlie Beth, and sister to Minnie. I am 54 years old, and I have HIV. At the age of 25, I was a single mother, struggling to get by, trying to take care of my babes. I decided to find a home church in the small town in which I live. I went to church and I met a man. He was the preacher's son. He was the music director. Upon meeting, we started dating, and David told me a lot of things about himself as when we were dating. He told me that he was a graduate of Rice University. I was impressed by that. You had to be really smart to get into Rice. He told me he was an entrepreneur, and I would constantly see him flying all over the world doing his business. I was impressed by that. He also told me that he was a Christian man, that he didn't smoke and drink and do drugs. And that was very important to me as a young mother. I didn't want my children exposed to that kind of lifestyle. And then he told me that he loved me and asked me to marry him. And so I did. And the day that we got married, we moved to another state. And upon moving to that other state, mine and my children's lives turned into a free-for-all. I started finding out things about my husband I had no idea about. The first thing I found out is that he'd not really been a graduate of Rice University. He'd actually been in prison during the time he should have been in college. Then I found a needle in our bedroom. I asked him about the needle. I had never seen one outside of a doctor's office before. He told me that since he was working out, he was taking steroids. This was long before Lala Zeta, and we knew about the dangers of steroids. I remember telling him, hey, you know, you do what you do, but don't leave them laying around, because what if the babies would have gotten a hold of them? And then the next thing I found out that my husband was having affairs with a lot of different people. And when I found this out, I decided that I would leave him. He had broken all of our marriage vows. The lies I'm telling you about are just the really big lies. He was also not an entrepreneur. He'd actually been in prison for embezzlement. He was a con artist. And he was using his biblical knowledge, being raised in the church by his mother and father, to actually con people out of their money in churches. I was devastated, and I didn't want to be with him anymore. So you know what I did? I joined the Air Force. Now, I know I don't look like a military type of chick. However, it was as a young mother, it was a way to, you know, create a life for us, to get a future, to, you know, have something solid to hold on to. All I wanted to do was take care of my babes. And so I did. I joined the Air Force. I was so excited. I remember, you know, swearing my allegiance to protect my country and to protect my president. I remember that day so well, and I thought, gosh, only in America can you have this kind of an opportunity to start your life again. I was ready to be shipped out to the Air Force in a couple of weeks, and my recruiter called me and told me they had lost my blood test. And would I please come back in? I went to the MEP Center in Dallas. They took me down a very long hallway. We passed the lab. I explained to the guy I was supposed to go in there and get my blood test. He said, no, you need to come with me. They took me to the very back of the building. They put me in a very small room about the size of a half bath. And then the Marine that took me down there, he just stood there against the door and guarding it. He wouldn't talk to me. He wouldn't say anything. I remember trying to say, hey, you must have me confused with someone else. I need to get my blood test. He still wouldn't say anything to me. He just kept standing there. Finally, another man came in. I guess he was a doctor. He had a white coat on. And he started telling me that I tested positive. And I was like, okay, cool. And he said, no, you tested HIV positive. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Because see, at the age of 27, positive to me meant good. Negative meant bad. So I had no idea what the man was talking about. And so I said, well, that's good, right? That's good. I have great positive blood. And he's like, no, no. He said, you don't understand. He said, what I'm trying to tell you is that you tested positive for AIDS. You have AIDS. I remember the first thing I said to that doctor. I said, look, I am 27 years old. I have 2 babies who depend on me. And that morning I had been filling out my will, trying to be a responsible parent because I was going into the Air Force. And I told him this, and he said, well, it's a good thing that you filled out your will because you have 6 months to 18 months to live. A lot of things have happened since that time. A lot of good things and a lot of bad things. Good thing is, I didn't die in 6 months to 18 months. In a few months, I will have lived with HIV for 30 years. Supposedly, they say, you know what they are? Well, they say. I always wondered who they were. But they say that supposedly I am the longest female in the United States of America to have never progressed to full-blown AIDS, never even been close. I never minded my HIV. I never minded the meds, the doctors, the lab tests, the night sweats, all the symptoms that you have. I never even minded, dying. I never minded having wasting syndrome, lipodystrophy. Okay, wait a minute, I'm lying. I did mind the wasting syndrome, and I do mind the lipodystrophy. I'm a little thing, okay? However, I didn't mind even dying if that was what I was supposed to be, or what was supposed to happen to me. That was my lot, and that would be my death, and I accepted that. But what I did mind was all the cruel and hateful things that my children had to hear, that my children had to witness. Because of the way those were treated with HIV and AIDS, I hid for a year. I, like so many others, did not tell anyone that I was HIV. In fact, the doctors told you to tell people you had leukemia. But that got really hard because I went to my 10-year reunion shortly after I was diagnosed. And I can remember one of my girlfriends, my classmates, asked me, she said, well, is it acute? I had no idea what she was talking about. But because it sounded really bad the way she said it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's it. Well, I had to go home and study about a disease I didn't even have so I could perpetuate the lie I had been having to tell. During that year, I would lie in bed every night and I would ask myself, what would y'all do to me if I told you I had HIV? Were you the one that was going to burn my house down like they did the 3 boys in Florida? Were you going to be the one that picketed my children's school saying we don't want your children here? Who was the wolf in sheep's clothing? Who was going to shine and hurt my family if you knew I had HIV? And then one night I was laying there and I realized I had been asking myself the wrong question. I should have been asking myself what would happen if I didn't tell you I had HIV. And when I thought about that, it was much scarier. I thought about all the teenagers out there who, what if they got infected? Who was going to love them? Who was going to take care of them? Who was going to take them to the prom or kiss them? So many young people. I was probably one of the older people that I knew with HIV. Everyone was much younger than I was, and I thought, oh my gosh, what would happen if they get infected? I'd always been an educated woman. I had always taken care of my body. If I had known about HIV, I would have protected myself. And so, I started doing what I do now. I began my life educating, being an activist, and speaking out. When I did, my children and I did become a target. One of the first things that happened was a man in the neighborhood felt it was his duty to go and tell all the parents of the kids that my children played with that I had AIDS. And so all the kids quit coming around. Elizabeth, my daughter, who is now doing what y'all do, she tried to have an 8th birthday party. She wanted to have a slumber party. And right at the last minute, all the families started calling and canceling. I knew when I looked into my daughter's eyes that she knew they weren't coming because her mother had a disease. My son was beaten every day in elementary and junior high. He was made fun of, and the whole time they were beating him, they were calling his mother a whore with AIDS. Every day when he walked outside, there were 2 boys across the street. They would all walk to the bus. But they wouldn't walk with Seth. They would just sing a song. Y'all know that song, The Addams Family? Da-da-da-da. Their song was called The AIDS Family. And it had a lot of horrible lyrics in it. And Every day, Seth would hear this song. Also, when I'm in public, I think probably the most impactful thing that happened to me personally, not to my children, was that I was denied going into one high school. They wouldn't let me on campus. Everyone else had, they would not. So the media got involved. And I remember a man named Ben Shepherd wrote a letter to the editor of the local paper, Corpus Christi Caller-Times. He called me a loathsome creature with a loathsome disease. And he wished that I would get gonorrhea of the eyes and go blind. I couldn't imagine that type of sentiment, much less directed at another human being. That was probably when I experienced, I had always thought that I understood what discrimination was, what prejudice was. I had no idea. But for each person that showed hate to my children, I decided to surround them with 10 more who loved them. Our lives became, I can't say easier, but they became better. Seth got big. People didn't beat him up anymore. They went to high school and the kids were a little more accepting. They wanted to know about HIV and AIDS. And so our lives for a time were kind of on a roll. And then in 2005, I experienced something that I thought I would never experience again. With all the progress we had made, all those that had been educated, there was still fear, still stigma, and still those who lived in the shadows. He was a young man when he experimented with drugs. He left that life behind and he married a sweet wife who gave him a child, a son. When his wife was pregnant with their second son, a random blood test revealed that he was HIV positive. They lived in fear for the next few months. He was so afraid that he had infected his wife and had infected his children. When the blood test came back that showed that he had not infected the children or his wife, that's when he began his life in the shadows. For the next 20 years, he didn't share his status. He trusted no one. His wife ironically died of cancer when the boys were teenagers. And this man moved to Corpus Christi, to Texas, from another state. And I'm not going to say the state, but it's southern, and it's Crimson Tide. He moved to Texas, and he was in such awe and admiration at the Coastal Bend Wellness Foundation. For the first time, he felt loved for the human being that he was. I had the honor of knowing and loving this man. We were to be married last October. But my Bill passed away as I held him in my arms. And then I lifted him up to be with his sweet wife, Nancy, and his father, William, who awaited him on the other side. Because his family still felt fear and were ashamed of Bill, my Bill never had a funeral. My Bill never had a memorial. And Bill never got the chance to say thank you to the state of Texas and to the Coastal Bend Wellness Foundation for the gifts you gave to him. The gifts for feeling loved when he felt unlovable. The gift of being able to say, my name is Bill, and I have AIDS. So for my Bill, thank you for strength when he was weak, courage when he was afraid, and love when he felt unlovable. The best thing that happened since finding out I was HIV was that eventually I was able to look at it as a gift. Today, HIV has given me more than it has ever taken away. I always wanted to be a teacher. I'm an educator. I always wanted to be part of something that served the greater good. I hope I have. I always wanted to make a difference. and they allowed me to try. In the beginning of HIV/AIDS, there was nothing. There were no social programs, no meds, no medical programs, no doctors, no testing, no outreach. There was no Texas Department of Health HIV division. In fact, your professions, most of your professions and your jobs, they didn't even exist. There was only an unknown killer, an unknown virus, an unknown pandemic facing all of mankind. But the United States of America was the only country in the world to give this disease a face. In Africa, they called it Slim's disease. Other countries had other names for it, but we gave it a face, and we gave it a gay man's face. And when we did that, we let loose a monster, because at the same time gay men were dying in California, there were women and children on the other coast dying of the same symptoms, but because they weren't a gay man, they didn't make the connection. When it was finally identified as a sex blood-transmitted virus, it had invaded our lives like no other disease than smallpox. So much hysteria, so much fear. There was talk of segregating us, putting us on an island. They didn't want us to use their restrooms. They didn't want us to use their restaurants. And they sure as heck didn't want us in the swimming pool or the hot tub. Mainstream America, upon doing this, as I said, let loose a monster. For a time, America lost its compassion, lost its empathy. And while a few, such as yourselves, saw it as an opportunity to help someone in need, others saw it as a reason to judge, to exclude, to discriminate. So many with HIV/AIDS hid in silence. Some did not. We decided, some of us, that we would not be afraid, okay, a little bit afraid, of tens of thousands that had set themselves against us. We would continue to speak up. We would continue to lift ourselves up. We may have been sick, and some of us dying, but our voices were still fierce and strong. In the mid-1980s, communities, cities, and towns all across Texas came together with unique individuals. Their mission, to love the unlovable, to touch what society had deemed the untouchable, and to provide support and compassion and comfort to those mostly dying of AIDS back then. They began with limited donations and small fundraisers, but were able to establish small grassroots organizations that served people with HIV. They usually only offered a couple of programs. Sometimes you get a little bit of food. Most of them had support groups. And then you had the buddy program. And the buddy program was volunteers. I don't know where they got them, but somehow they showed up. And these volunteers would sit with you, go to the store with you, take you to the doctor, clean your house, just do little things that a friend might do. But most of the time, back then, these people were the ones who sat with them when they were sick and dying, as families had alienated them and disinherited them. The 90s were an amazing time. I do not want us to forget, though, that these people, these volunteers that I just spoke of, they were the backbone upon which all of us would be able to build a strong foundation for what was to come. Because in the 1990s, medicines came out, cocktails. And for the first time, after so much illness, dying, and deaths, there was a ray of hope. T-cells went up, and viral loads came down. And yet there was still illness, dying, and deaths. And after every loved one lost, the ASOs and different organizations in the Texas Department of Health renewed their dedication to battle this horrific epidemic and to fight stigma and discrimination. In the years that followed, all of you, educators, testers, case managers, outreach workers, counselors, administrators, you would all continue to lift us up, and you all were a beacon of hope when our lights had faded. In the 21st century, the Texas Department of Health HIV division has continued to expand, continued to embrace compassion, awareness, and services for all. To date, the ASOs and your organizations and the Texas Department of Health have provided services to hundreds of thousands of people living, surviving, thriving now with HIV. They also continue to provide vital education aimed at reducing risk, thereby reducing infection rates. The numbers are proof, as she just showed you, that the work you do is important and impactful, and that our communities, our children, are safer and healthier due to your efforts. We have been given a solid history, a strong foundation upon which to build. And so the future of our organizations, your work, and the Texas Department of Health is to continue the work set out over 30 years ago by those dedicated individuals, and to continue to educate hearts as well as minds. All of our organizations are very different, in my opinion. We are the only ones that I know of that are in business to go out of business. For when we can close our doors for the last time, I believe the angels will be rejoicing in heaven. For that will mean no one will ever walk through those doors again infected because they weren't educated. No man, woman, or child will ever know cruelty and discrimination and hate based on their disease. And no baby will ever again be born into a world of HIV/AIDS. On that day, hopefully, as we turn that key for the last time, they will look down upon us as if to say, "Job well done, my children." But until that day comes, our mission is clear and our fight continues. So I wish you love to comfort you and light to guide your journeys. Thank you.